Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Let me quickly do a sound check and then we'll be on our way to hopefully getting through the next episode of Sophie's World by Jostein Gaarder. Yeah, I think it's coming through. So let's see. Today I'm going to try to finish this book. If I'm not able to, then maybe one more episode is all that it's going to take. I'm going to give the link, but again, the discussion we can do a little bit towards the back part of the episode. But for the time being, we'll just get through the initial part of the reading. Right? Yeah, and you can click on the link and come and join the panel uh, if you would like to participate in any discussion. Uh, at the same time, I want to get to the garden party. There are probably about another 20 plus pages. So let's see how quickly I can get through it. So last episode was almost a wrap up of all the. It was a bird's eye view of the entire philosophical landscape that the author discussed. And then today, hopefully, it'll be a good fitting end to our fitting conclusion to what has been quite a fascinating book to go through, basically. And yeah, whoever is listening, good evening, wherever you are, good afternoon, good morning. Okay, so let's go. The Garden Party, that's the name of the last chapter, and then A White Crow. That's the line that describes that chapter in a nutshell. Hilda sat on the bed transfixed. She felt her arms and hands tremble as they gripped the heavy ring binder. So now, what do you call the gravity of that ring binder is going to be quite the thing for Hilda, basically, because it basically opened up an entire new world for her. Right? It was almost 11 o'clock. She had been reading for over 2 hours. From time to time, she had raised her eyes from the text and laughed aloud. But she also had turned over on her side and gasped. It was a good thing she was alone in the house. And what she had been through these last 2 hours. It started with Sophie trying to attract the major's attention on the way home from the cabin in the woods. She had finally climbed a tree and been rescued by Modern Goose, who had arrived like a guardian angel from Lebanon. Although it was a long, long time ago, Hilda had never forgotten how her father had read the wonderful adventures of Nils to her. Must be some kind of a book. For many years after that, she and her father had had a secret language together that was connected with the book. Now he had dragged the old goose out again. Then Sophie had her first experience as a lone. Increase the font. See. Then Sophie had her first experience as a lone customer in a cafe. Hilda had been especially taken with what Alberto said about Sartre and existentialism. Right? He had almost managed to convert her, although he had done that many times before in the ring binder too. Once, about a year ago, Hilda had bought a book on astrology. Another time, she had come home with a set of tarot cards. Next time, it was a book on spiritualism. Each time, her father had lectured her about superstition and her critical faculty, in quotes both, but he had waited until now for the final blow. His counterattack was deadly accurate. Clearly, his daughter would not be able to grow up without a thorough warning against that kind of thing. To be absolutely sure, he had waved to her from a TV screen in a radio store. He could have saved himself the trouble. What she wondered about the most of all was Sophie. Sophie, who are you? Where did you come from? Why have you come into my life? Finally, Sophie had been given a book about herself. Was it the same book that Hilda now had in her hands? That was only a ring binder. But even so, how could one find a book about oneself in a book about oneself? Exactly. Right? So this is exactly the kind of layered circular logic that you get into when you really start thinking about certain things. What would happen if Sophie began to read that book? Yeah, what would happen? What's going to happen now? What could happen now? There were only a few pages left in her ring binder. All right. So now she's um, reading about Sophie, basically. So she's back to the ring binder and now she's reading about Sophie. Sophie met her mother on the bus on her way home from town. Oh no, what would her mother say when she saw the book in Sophie's hand? Sophie tried to put it in the bag with all the streamers and balloons she had bought for the party, but she didn't quite make it. Hi, Sophie. We got the same bus. How nice. Hi, Mom. So the mother and daughter are meeting in the bus. You bought a book? Sophie says, no, not exactly. Sophie's World. That's the name of it. Sophie knew she didn't have the slightest chance of lying to her mother. So she said, I got it from Alberto. Yes, I'm sure you did. As I said, I'm looking forward to meeting this man. May I see? The mom asked Sophie. Would you mind very much waiting till we get home? At least it is my book, Mom. Sophie says. Of course, it's your book. I just want to take a peek at the first page. Okay. Sophie Amundsen was on her way home from school. This is how the book is reading on the first page. She had walked the first part of the way with Joanna. They had been discussing robots. Does it really say that? Yeah, again, spiritual butterfly garu and Hiranyakaman garu. Hello. Does it really say that? Asked Sophie. Yes, it does, Sophie. It was written by someone called Albert Nag. He must be a newcomer. What's your Alberto's name, by the way? Knox, says Sophie. It'll probably turn out that this extraordinary person has written a whole book about you, Sophie. It's called a, it's called using a pseudonym. Pseudonym means like a pen name. It's not him, Mom. Why don't you just give up? You don't understand anything anyway, says Sophie. No, I don't suppose I do. The garden party is tomorrow. Then everything will be all right again. Albert Nag lives in a completely different reality. That's why this book is a white crow, says Sophie. Right? You really must stop all this. Wasn't it a white rabbit? Asked her mom. You stop it, said Sophie. That was as far as they got before they reached their stop at the end of Clover Close. They ran straight into a demonstration. I see. My God, exclaimed Helene Amundsen. I really thought we would be spared street politics in this neighborhood. Okay, so even it was interesting, even for her mom, basically. Right? There were no more than about 10 or 12 people. Their banners read. So this was what was written on their banners. The major is at hand. Yes to yummy midsummer eats. More power to the UN, right? United Nations. Sophie almost felt sorry for her mother. Interesting. Never mind, she said. But it was a peculiar demonstration, Sophie. Quite absurd, really. It was a mere bagatelle, said Sophie. Okay, so there's a new word that she added to her vocabulary, right? The world changes more and more rapidly all the time. Actually, I'm not in the least surprised. You should be surprised that you're not surprised, at any rate. Not at all. They were violent. They weren't violent, were they? I just hope they haven't trampled all over our rose beds, says the mom. Surely it can't be necessary to demonstrate in a garden. Let's hurry home and see. So Sophie is now telling her mom, it was a philosophical demonstration. Mom, real philosophers don't trample on rosebuds. Ooh, right? That's a punchline that I'd like to use. Real philosophers don't trample on rosebuds. I'll tell you what, Sophie, I don't think I believe in real philosophers any longer. Everything is synthetic nowadays, right? That's also a good way of putting it. Everything is synthetic these days. They spent the afternoon and evening preparing for the party. They continued the next morning, setting and decorating the table. Joanna came over to give them a hand. Good grief, she said. Mom and Dad are coming too. It's your fault, Sophie, said Joanna. Everything was ready half an hour before the guests were due. The trees were festooned with streamers and Japanese lanterns. The garden gate, the trees lining the path, and the front of the house were hung with balloons. Sophie and Joanna had spent most of the afternoon blowing them up, the balloons basically. The table was set with chicken, salad, and different kinds of homemade bread. In the kitchen, there were raisin buns and a layer cake, Danish pastry, and chocolate cake. But from the start, the place of honor in the center of the table was reserved for the birthday cake. a pyramid of almond paste rings. On the top of the cake was a tiny figure of a girl in a confirmation dress, no less. Sophie's mother had assured her that it could just as well represent an unconfirmed 15-year-old. But Sophie was certain her mom had only put it in there because Sophie had told her she was not sure. She wanted to be confirmed. Her mother seemed to think the cake embodied the confirmation itself. There you go. Talk about two different ways of looking at the same. We haven't spared any expense, she repeated several times in half an hour before the party was due to start. That, I guess, must be the mom. The guests began to arrive. First came three of the girls from Sophie's class, dressed in summer shirts and light cardigans, long skirts, and the barest suggestion of eye makeup. A bit later, Jeremy and David came strolling in through the gate with a blend of shyness and boyish arrogance. I don't know how you can combine the shyness and the boyish arrogance. Anyway, that's the female author like sort of projecting basically. So take it for what it's worth. Happy birthday. You're an adult now too. Sophie noticed that Joanna and Jeremy had begun eyeing each other discreetly. Mm. There was something in the air. It was Midsummer Eve. Okay. Everybody had brought birthday presents, and it was a philosophical garden party. Interesting. Several of the guests had tried to find out what philosophy was. Although not all of them had managed to find philosophical presents, most of them had written something philosophical on their cards. Sophie received a philosophical dictionary as well as a diary with a lock. On the cover was written, "My personal philosophical thoughts." As the guests arrived, they were served apple juice in long stemmed wine glasses. Yes. Initially, the glass is just a wine glass with apple cider in it. Very soon, things will change. That's how it progresses. It's a progression. Sophie's mother did the serving. I mean, not within the party itself, but in life. That's how the Western progression goes. Sophie's mother did the serving. Welcome. And what is this young man's name? I don't believe we have met before. So glad you could come, Cecile. So the mom is talking to everybody. And all the younger guests had arrived and were strolling under the trees with their wine glasses. Joanna's parents drew up at the garden gate in a white Mercedes. The financial advisor was impeccably dressed in an expensively cut grey suit. Nice. His wife was wearing red pantsuit with dark red sequins. I don't know what those are. Sophie was sure she had bought a Barbie doll in a toy store dressed in that suit and had a tailor make it up her size. Okay. So I don't know what kind of thinking that is, but that's what Sophie was thinking. There was another possibility. The financial advisor could have bought the doll and given it to a magician to make it into a live woman. So she looked quite like the perfect Barbie doll. That's what Sophie is saying. But this possibility was unlikely. So Sophie rejected it. I see. Interesting. They stepped out of that Mercedes and walked into the garden, where younger guests looked at them with surprise. The financial advisor presented a long, narrow package from the Brixton family. Okay, so those are so her name, I guess, is her friend's name is Joanna Brixton. Sophie tried to maintain her composure when it turned out to be, yes, it was a Barbie doll. Wow. So Sophie is truly thinking like a philosopher. Like, okay, what are the possibilities? But the possibilities she rejected actually came out to be true. Not that he gave it to his wife, but he gave it to Sophie basically. But Joanna had made no such effort. Are you crazy? Sophie doesn't play with dolls, Joanna said to her dad, I guess. Mrs. Brixton came hurrying over with all her sequins clanking. But it's only for decoration, she said. Well, thank you very much indeed. Sophie tried to smooth things over. Now I can't start. I can start a collection, right? A full collection. People began to drift towards the table. We're only waiting for Alberto, said Sophie's mother to her in a somewhat brisk tone that was intended to hide her growing apprehension. Rumors of the special guest of honor had already spread, among the other guests. He has promised to come, so he'll come, said Sophie. But we can't see the guest before he arrives, can we? Said the mom. Of course we can. Let's go ahead. Helene Amundsen began to seat people around the long table. She made sure that the vacant chair was between her own and Sophie's place. She said a few words about the beautiful weather and the fact that Sophie was now a grown up, 15 years old. They had been sitting at the table for half an hour when a middle aged man with a black goatee and a beret came walking up Clover Close and in through the garden gate. He was carrying a bouquet of 15 red roses. That's pretty exciting. Alberto, said Sophie. Sophie left the table and ran to greet him. She threw her arms around his neck and took the bouquet from him. He responded to welcome by rooting around in his jacket pocket and drawing out a couple of Chinese firecrackers which he lit and tossed into the yard. As he approached the table, I guess the underline the Chinese firecrackers. I think we have those in India as well these days. Anyway, as he approached the table, he lit a sparkler and set it on top of the almond pyramid. Then he went over and stood at the empty place between Sophie and her mother. Interesting. I don't know. I don't quite understand the symbolism here, but apparently Alberto is standing between Sophie and her mother. So maybe the philosophy makes Sophie sort of untethered from her mom, then become an individual on her own. Possible. I'm delighted to be here, he said. The guests were dumbstruck. Mrs. Ingberston gave her husband a significant look. Sophie's mother was so relieved that the man had finally arrived, however, that she would have forgiven him anything. Sophie herself was struggling to suppress her laughter. Yeah, Dauji, you can come and join if you can. Otherwise, we can always have a discussion later in one of the other sessions. So no worries, right? Just take care of what you need to take care of. You know, life is too important. So anyway, let's go back to the party. It's very exciting. Um, Helene Amundsen tapped on her glass and said, okay, just to gain everybody's attention, let us also welcome Alberto Knox to his philosophical garden party. He's not my new boyfriend because although my husband is so often away at sea, I don't have a new boyfriend for the time being. So the mom is making some things very, very clear, basically, right? Just so that nobody is under any false impressions. However, this astounding person is Sophie's new philosophy teacher. Okay, I have to quickly take a 30-second break. I'll come and read this toast again because it's quite the fascinating. Just give me 1 second. Let's see if I can work this. I have such an old computer that nothing works on this. All right. So if you guys can still hear me, I'll continue the reading. Okay. So Helene Amundsen tapped on her glass and said, so she's proposing what is known as a toast, right? And this is a very common thing that happens in most parties and most Western get-togethers. And I'll put in a plug here. So there is this club or organization called the Toastmasters, right? Toastmasters International. That's what it's called. So the whole idea of that organization is, or at least uh, the marketing symbol is that of proposing a toast, right? Uh, but essentially, it's more of a public speaking, getting people to talk more in public, etc., etc. That kind of an organization. It helps people to get organized groups and then practice speaking to the group. So, so given that, this is what exactly a quite straight up plain vanilla toast looks like. So you tap on your glass, and then just like Helen Amundsen, so she said, "Let us also welcome Alberto Knox to this philosophical garden party. He's not my new boyfriend because although my husband is often so often away at sea, I don't have a new boyfriend for the time being. That tells a lot. For the time being, she doesn't have a new boyfriend. I don't know if she's being sarcastic or she's being literal. Right? Anyway. However, this astounding person is Sophie's new philosophy teacher. His prowess extends further than to setting off fireworks. And this man is able, for example, to draw a live rabbit out of a top hat. Or was it a crow, Sophie? The mom said. Many thanks, said Alberto. He sat down. Cheers, said Sophie, and the guests raised their glasses and drank to his health. They sat for a long time over their chicken and salad. Suddenly, Joanna got up, walked determinedly over to Jeremy, and gave him a resounding kiss on the lips. He responded by trying to topple her backward over the table so as to get a better grip as he returned her kiss. Okay. Well, I have never, exclaimed Mrs. Brixton. So the mom of Joanna is in shock. Not on the table, children, was Mrs. Amundsen's only comment. Of course, each is worried about their own thing. Why not? Asked Alberto, turning towards her. That was an odd question, she said. It's never wrong for a real philosopher to ask questions. Exactly. Right? Underline the real, basically. Right? That's the punchline. A couple of other boys who had not been kissed started to throw chicken bones up on the roof. This too elicited only a mild comment from Sophie's mother. Would you mind not doing that? It's such a nuisance when there are chicken bones in the gutter. All right. Sorry, said one of the boys, whereupon they started throwing chicken bones over the garden hedge instead. I think it's time to clear the plates away and serve the cake, said Mrs. Amundsen finally. Sophie and Joanna, will you give me a hand? She said. On the way to the kitchen, there was only time for a brief discussion. So, what made you kiss him? Sophie said to Joanna. I sat looking at his mouth and couldn't resist it. He's so cute, she said. How did it taste? Not exactly like I'd imagined, but it was the first time then. But not the last, she said. Okay, enough said. Coffee and cake were soon on the table. Alberto had started giving the boys some of his firecrackers when Sophie's mother tapped on her coffee cup. So again, she's drawing attention, right? It's a very common thing to do. I'm not going to make a long speech, she began, but I only gave this one daughter, and it is only this once that exactly 1 week and day ago she reached the age of 15, right? As you see, we have spared no expense. There are 24 almond rings on the birthday cake. So there's at least one whole ring for each of you. Those who help themselves first can take 2 rings because we start from the top and the rings get bigger and bigger as you go. That's the way it is in life too. When Sophie was a little girl, she went tripping around in tiny little rings. But as the years went by, so now we are getting into the true symbolism of the philosophy, right? When Sophie was a little girl, she went tripping around in little tiny rings. But as the years went by, the rings got bigger and bigger. Now they reach right over to the old town and back. And what is more, with a father who is at sea so much, she makes calls to all parts of the world. We congratulate you on your 15th birthday, Sophie. Wonderful. Delightful, exclaimed Mrs. Brixton. Sophie was not sure whether she was referring to her mother, the speech, the birthday cake, or Sophie herself. The guests applauded, and one of the boys threw a firecracker up into the pear tree. Joanna left the table and pulled Jeremy up off his chair. They lay down on the grass and started kissing each other again. After a while, they rolled in under the red currant bushes. So we're talking about a very open society, like the Norwegian society kind of thing, right? So the social norms are different. Let's put it that way. Let's leave it at that. Nowadays, it's the girl who takes the initiative," said Mrs. Brixton, and we are talking about the 90s here. Okay. Having said that, he got up and went over to the red currant bushes, where he started observing the phenomenon at close quarters. The rest of the so this is Mr. Brixton, not Mrs. So he went and started observing the phenomenon. I believe I don't know what is there to observe. The rest of the guests followed suit. Only Sophie and Alberto remained sitting at the table. The other guests now stood in a semicircle around Joanna and Jeremy. They can't be stopped, said Mrs. Brixton, not without a certain pride. I see. No, generation follows generation, she said her husband. He looked around expecting applause for his well chosen words, and the only response was a few silent nods. He added, it can't be helped. All right. Sophie saw from a distance that Jeremy was trying to unbutton Johanna's white shirt, which was already covered with green stains from the grass. She was fumbling with his belt. So, what did Mrs. Ingebrigtsen say? Don't catch cold, she said. Sophie looked despairingly at Alberto. It's happening more quickly than I thought, he said. We have to get away from here as soon as possible. I just have to make a short speech. So then, so now he needs the attention of everybody, right? So Sophie clapped her hands loudly. Could everyone please come back and sit down again? Alberto is going to make a speech. Everyone except Johanna and Jeremy came drifting back to their places at the table. Are you really going to make a speech? Asked Helene Amundsen. How charming, she said. Thank you, said Alberto. And you like going for walks, I know. It is important to stay in shape. And it's much nicer when you have a dog to keep you company. Hermes, isn't that its name? Said Helene Amundsen. Alberto stood up. Dear Sophie, he began. Since this is a philosophical garden party, I will make a philosophical speech, he said. This was greeted by a burst of applause. In this riotous company, a dose of reason might not be out of place. But whatever happens, let's not forget to congratulate Sophie on her 15th birthday. He had hardly finished these sentences when they heard the drone of an approaching sports plane. Drone means the sound of the engine. So drone as a noun is the thing itself, but drone as a as an it can also be used as a sound. Basically, that's what they're referring to. Drone of an approaching sports plane. The drone of a plane is the sound it makes. It flew in low over the garden. Behind it streamed a long tail banner saying "Happy 15th birthday." So especially in summer, it's not unusual to see these planes flying around where they have a banner behind them. Right? This led to renewed applause, even louder than before. There you see, Mrs. Hamilton cried joyfully. This man can do more than set off fireworks. Thank you. It was a mere bagatelle, he said. During the past few weeks, Sophie and I have carried out a major philosophical investigation. We shall here and now reveal our findings. So, the philosophical investigation findings he is going to present. We shall reveal the innermost secrets of our existence. The little gathering was now so quiet that only sounds were the twittering of the birds and a few subdued noises from the red currant bushes. Go on, said Sophie. After a thorough philosophical study, which has led. So I think this is going to be probably some kind of a summary from Alberto himself of what the book is all about, right? So let's see. Which has after a thorough philosophical study, which has led from the first Greek philosophers to the present day, we have discovered that we are living our lives in the mind of a major who is at this moment serving as a United Nations observer in Lebanon. He's also written a book about us for his daughter back in Lilsan. Her name is Hilda Mailer Nag, and she was 15 years old on the same day as Sophie. The book about us lay on her bedside table when she woke up early on the morning of June 15th. To be more precise, it was in the form of a ring binder. Even as we speak, she can feel the final pages of the ring binder under her index finger. A feeling of apprehension had begun to spread around the table because the guy is saying we are all in the book. Our existence is therefore neither more nor less than a kind of birthday diversion for Hilda Mailer Nag. We have all been invited as a framework for the major's philosophical education of his daughter. This means, for example, that the white Mercedes at the gate is not worth a cent. It's just a bagatelle. It's worth no more than a white Mercedes that drives around and round inside the head of a poor UN major who has just this minute sat down in the shade of a palm tree to avoid getting sunstroke. The days are hot in Lebanon, my friends, said Alberto. Garbage, exclaimed the financial advisor. This is absolute pure nonsense. You are welcome to your opinion, Alberto continued unabashed. But the truth is that this garden party which is absolutely pure nonsense. The only dose of reason in the whole party is his speech. At that, the financial advisor got up and said, here we are trying our best to run a business and to make sure we have insurance coverage against every kind of risk. Then along comes this know it all who tries to destroy it all with his philosophical allegations. In quotes. Alberto nodded in agreement. There is indeed no insurance to cover this kind of philosophical insight. We're talking of something worse than a natural catastrophe, sir. But as you are probably aware, insurance doesn't cover those either. This is not a natural catastrophe, the financial agent said, right? Financier. No, it is an existential catastrophe. Ooh. For example, just take a look under the currant bushes and you will see what I mean. You cannot insure yourself against the collapse of your whole life. Neither can you insure yourself against the sun going out. Do we have to put up with this? Asked Joanna's father, looking at his wife. She shook her head, and so did Sophie's mother. What a shame, she said. And after we had spared no expense. She keeps repeating that. The younger guests continued to look at Alberto. We want to hear more, said a curly haired boy with glasses. Nice. Thank you. But there is so much more to say. When you have realized that you are a dream image in another person's sleepy consciousness, then, in my opinion, it is wisest to be silent. But I can finish by recommending that you take a short course in the history of philosophy. It is important to be critical of the older generation's values. If I have tried to teach Sophie anything, it is precisely that to think critically. Hegel called it thinking negatively. Interesting. Okay. The financial advisor was still standing, drumming his fingers on the table. This agitator is attempting to break down all the sound values which the school and the church and we ourselves are trying to instill in the younger generation. It is they who have the future before them and who one day will inherit everything we have built up, no doubt. If this man is not immediately removed from this gathering, I intend to call our lawyer. He will know how to deal with he will know how to deal with this situation. It makes little difference whether you deal with this situation or not, since you are nothing but a shadow. Anyway, Sophie and I are about to leave the party, since for us, the philosophy course has not been purely theoretical. It has also had its practical side, where time is ripe. When the time is ripe, we will perform our disappearing act. This is how we are going to sneak our way out of the major's consciousness, said Albert. Helene Amundsen took hold of her daughter's arm. You're not leaving me, are you, Sophie? She asked. Sophie put her arms around her mother. She looked up at Alberto. And what did Sophie say? Mom is so sad, she said. No, that's just ridiculous. Don't forget that what you have learned. It is this sort of nonsense we must liberate ourselves from. Your mother is a sweet and kind lady, just as the little Red Riding Hood who came to my door that day had a basket filled with food for her grandmother. Your mother is no more sad than the plane that just flew over needed fuel for its congratulation maneuvers. Okay, I think I see what you mean, said Sophie and turned back to her mother. That's why I have to do what he says, Mom. One day I had to leave you. Absolutely. Then um, Helene Amundsen said, I'm going to miss you, said her mother. But if there is a heaven over this one, you'll just have to fly. I promise to take good care of Govinda. Mm. Does it eat one or two lettuce leaves a day? I guess that's like a turtle or something like that. Alberto put his hand on her shoulder. Or I don't remember what kind of pet that was. Alberto put his hand on her shoulder. Neither you nor anyone else here will miss us for the simple reason that you do not exist. You are no more than shadows. That is the worst insult I have ever heard, Mrs. Ingebrigtsen burst out. Her husband nodded. Yeah. If nothing else, we can always get him nailed for defamation of character. I'm sure he's a communist. He wants to strip us of everything we hold dear. This man is a scoundrel, he said. With that, both Alberto and the financial advisor sat down. The latter's face was crimson with rage. Now, Joanna, or I guess the financier's face or whatever, Now, Joanna and Jeremy also came and sat at the table. Their clothes were grubby and crumpled. Joanna's golden hair was caked with mud and earth. Mom, I'm going to have a baby, she announced. Nice. All right, but you'll have to wait till you get home, she said. Even better. She had immediate support from her husband. She'll simply have to contain herself, he said. And if there is to be a christening tonight, she'll have to arrange it herself. Alberto looked down at Sophie with a somber expression. It's time, he said. Can't you at least bring us a little more coffee before you go? Asked her mother. Of course, Mom. I'll do it right away. Sophie took the thermos from the table. Sophie took the thermos from the table. She had to make more coffee. While she stood waiting for it to brew, she fed the birds and the golden fish. She also went into the bathroom and put a leaf of lettuce out for Govinda. She couldn't see the cat anywhere, but she opened a large can of cat food, emptied it into a bowl, and set it out on the step. She felt her tears welling up, of course. So Govinda is a cat, I guess. When she returned with the coffee, garden party looked more like a children's party than a young woman's philosophical celebration. Several soda bottles had been knocked over on the table. There was chocolate cake smeared all over the tablecloth, and the dish of raisin buns lay upside down on the lawn. Just as Sophie arrived, excuse me, one of the boys put a firecracker to the layer cake, which exploded all over the table and the guests. The worst casualty was Mrs. Inbrigtson's red pantsuit. The curious thing was that both she and everybody else took it with the utmost calm. Joanna picked up a huge piece of chocolate cake, smeared it all over Jeremy's face, and proceeded to lick it off again. Her mother and Alberto were sitting in the glider a little way away from the others. They waved to Sophie. So you finally had your confidential talk? Asked Sophie. And you were perfectly right, said her mother, quite elated now. Alberto is a very altruistic person. I entrust you to his strong arms. Sophie sat down between them. Two of the boys had managed to climb onto the roof. One of the girls went around pricking holes in all the balloons with a hairpin. Then an uninvited guest arrived on a motorcycle with a crate of beer and bottles of aquavit strapped to the carrier. A few helpful souls welcomed him in. At that, the financial advisor rose from the table. He clapped his hands and said, "You want to play a game?" He grabbed a bottle of beer, drank it down, and set the empty bottle in the middle of the lawn. Then he went to the table and fetched last five rings of the birthday cake. He showed the other guests how to throw the rings so they landed over the neck of the bottle. The death throws, said Alberto. We'd better get away before the major ends it all and Hilda closes the ring mind. You'll have to clear up alone, Mom, Sophie said. It doesn't matter, child. This was no life for you. If Alberto can give you a better one, nobody will be happier than I. Didn't you tell me he had a white horse? Asked the mom. Sophie looked out across the garden. It was unrecognizable. Bottles, chicken bones, buns, and balloons were trampled into the grass. There was This was once my little garden of Eden, she said. And now you are being driven out of it, said Albert. One of the boys was sitting in the white Mercedes. He revved the engine and the car smashed through the garden gate, up the gravel path, and down into the garden. Sophie felt a hard grip on her arm as she was dragged into the den. Then she heard Alberto's voice. Now, he said. At the same moment, the white Mercedes crashed into an apple tree. Unripe fruit showered down onto the hood. That's gone so too far, shouted the financial advisor. I demand substantial compensation. His wife gave him her full support. It's the damn scoundrel's fault. Where is he? They have vanished into thin air, said Helene Amundsen, not without a touch of pride. Wonderful. She drew herself up to her full height, walked towards the long table, and began to clear up after the philosophical garden party. More coffee, anyone? I guess that's what she asked. And then, obviously, I didn't quite see all the way to the end of the book because the garden party is over. There is another chapter called Counterpoint. Let's see how long this is. Right? If it is too long, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to read it today. Right? This garden party was very good. So I don't want to mix it up with the other chapter. So maybe I'm going to end it here, and then maybe in the next round, next episode, which will be episode number 30, I guess. It's a good round number, and then we can finish up during that. It's already about 40 minutes, and I'm a little tired myself of reading. So I'll just quickly take a look at the comments. Lots of comments from Spiritual Butterfly Garu. Thank you very much. And Nachiketa the Great. Hello, sir. Else is there. Iranikamlan Garu. Hello once again. Davji, no problem. Take your time. Right? You can come back to the stream anytime or to the channel anytime, and then we can always have a conversation. So this is, let me do this. I'll give you the link. If anybody wants to join and have a couple of words, more than welcome to do so. Right? I'll wait for exactly 1 minute, and then after that, I'll cut. But it's quite fascinating, right? This whole idea that some people are characters in a book. At the same time, they are trying to have their own, pretend as if they are real people, right? The real philosophical question, of course, is: are we characters in a book, right? Somebody's book, but that's not even the point, right? From an Indian context, Indian philosophical context, it doesn't matter whether there's a book or whether there is a reality or whether there is something else, right? Layered reality. The only question remains is, who are you, right? And that makes all the difference. SKR. Hello, sir. Welcome to
Hello,
the
hello. How are you?
Oh, Sai Kiran, Dr. Sai Kiran, how are you, sir?
Fine, sir. Long time no see.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a very busy lead up to this. So,
Yeah. Did you did you block me in Telegram?
sir, we can talk about it offline. This session is about Sophie's world. If you have your perspective, please voice it.
Yeah, I have read it completely. I think it's a beautiful story, but per se, I did not listen to today's one, so maybe we can do
Yeah,
it offline.
yeah, no problem.
Should I be
So
staying?
it's totally up to you, sir. If you want to discuss, so this entire stream is dedicated to only discussing philosophy and Sophie's world for now, right?
Yeah. So
So
nothing about
if you,
today's chapter, but it's a bit too much in circles, the story.
hmm,
Yeah.
yeah, no, no. Please present your point of view on the book itself, basically, right? That we can always discuss.
I mean, it's a great comparison to know Western philosophy, right? All the different kinds of philosophies are there, and that yeah, nothing right now, sir. Will this? I'll be waiting for that offline discussion.
Yeah, yeah, no problem, sir.
Yeah,
Okay. So with that, if anybody else wants to join as well, more than welcome. Again, I'll stay for another 30 seconds. If you want to discuss about today's chapter or the book itself, right? Again, philosophy, metaphysics, uh, anything else that is related to this topic, basically, right? And it's a English stream, so English is the medium of choice, like language of choice. Hello, sir. Yoganand, Mr. Yoganand Reddy. Hello. So yeah, I guess we can uh, we can cut now, and the Scare Garu, I'll stay on the back once I go offline. Then we can quickly discuss. But I have to go myself because Sunday morning, right? I'm a bit busy. So we'll quickly, if you want to ask me anything, you can do it in the backstage, and then after that we'll cut. Okay.
Sure, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to end the stream.